A major reason Henry VIII broke with the Catholic Church was his desperate need for a male heir. When he first separated England from Rome, he had only one surviving child, a daughter, Mary, and early modern England was deeply uneasy about the idea of a reigning queen. Today that seems strange to us, since Queen Elizabeth II reigned for most of our lifetimes. But in the early 16th century, female rule was widely viewed as unstable and dangerous. Henry eventually received the son he wanted through his third wife, Jane Seymour, who tragically died shortly after childbirth. When Henry died in 1547, the throne passed to his 9-year-old son, Edward VI. What followed was a dramatic religious swing, as each of Henry's 3 children shaped the Church of England according to their own convictions. Edward inherited the crown at age 9, so a regency council of powerful nobles governed on his behalf. Edward himself, educated by Protestant tutors, was an ardent supporter of the Reformation. During Edward's reign, England underwent a much deeper transformation toward Protestantism. Protestant doctrine became firmly established, reshaping the beliefs and practices of the Church. Priests, who had long been required to remain celibate under Catholic tradition, were now permitted to marry, reflecting a major shift in religious expectations. Services were no longer conducted in Latin, but in English, making worship more accessible to ordinary people. Churches themselves were visibly altered, as images, relics, and statues associated with Catholic devotion were removed in an effort to eliminate what reformers saw as superstition. Most of the traditional Catholic sacraments were abolished as well, leaving only baptism and communion at the center of religious life. Through these changes, Edward's government pushed England much closer to a clearly Protestant identity than it had been under Henry VIII. Yet this dramatic transformation came during a very brief reign. Edward died in 1553, before reaching the age of 16, cutting short the momentum of reform. By that time, many people in England had come to believe that Protestantism would define the nation permanently. They were wrong. Edward was succeeded by his older half-sister Mary, daughter of Catherine of Aragon. Mary had been raised a devout Catholic, and her Spanish upbringing only deepened her religious commitment. Upon taking the throne, Mary immediately set out to undo the religious changes of the previous reign and restore England to Catholicism. She ordered the Mass to be reinstated, bringing worship back to its traditional form, and re-established clerical celibacy, once again requiring priests to remain unmarried. Working with Parliament, she also secured a formal return to papal authority, reuniting the English Church with Rome after years of separation. Through these actions, Mary sought to reverse her brother's reforms and re-establish England as a firmly Catholic kingdom. However, Mary's efforts were ultimately doomed for several important reasons. By the middle of the 16th century, Protestantism had already taken firm root in England, particularly among the urban population, where many had embraced its teachings and were unwilling to abandon them. At the same time, the nobility strongly opposed any full restoration of Catholicism because of the financial consequences it would bring. During Henry VIII's dissolution of the monasteries, they had gained vast amounts of church land, and a return to papal authority threatened to strip them of this wealth. Mary's own policies further weakened her cause, as her harsh persecution of Protestants, ordering the execution of hundreds, earned her the nickname Bloody Mary and alienated much of the population. Rather than suppressing dissent, these actions intensified anti-Catholic sentiment. Finally, her marriage to Philip II of Spain damaged her popularity even more. As a foreigner and a staunch Catholic, Philip was widely distrusted in England, and many feared his influence over the country. Together, these factors made Mary's attempt to restore Catholicism both unpopular and ultimately unsustainable. Mary reigned only 5 years and died childless in 1558. Her failure paved the way for her half-sister Elizabeth to lead England back toward Protestantism. Elizabeth I, the daughter of Anne Boleyn, became the last Tudor monarch and proved to be one of the most capable rulers in English history. As a moderate Protestant, Elizabeth recognized that England had been deeply divided by decades of abrupt religious change under her predecessors. Rather than pushing for extreme reform in either direction, she sought a balanced approach that could bring stability to the kingdom. Elizabeth's primary goal was not strict adherence to a single set of religious doctrines, but the restoration of political unity and order. Through this pragmatic approach, she aimed to ease tensions, prevent further conflict, and create a religious settlement that most of her subjects could accept. Elizabeth persuaded Parliament to repeal Mary's Catholic legislation and restore royal control over the Church. However, instead of calling herself supreme head of the Church, as Henry had, Elizabeth used the more cautious title Supreme Governor of the Church of England. This title avoided offending Protestants, who believed Christ alone was head of the Church, while also reassuring conservative subjects. Elizabeth accepted many of the key reforms that had been introduced under earlier Protestant rulers. She maintained the use of English in church services, allowed members of the clergy to marry, and endorsed a form of doctrine that leaned clearly in a Protestant direction. At the same time, however, she deliberately preserved certain traditional elements of the Church. The episcopal structure, with bishops maintaining authority, remained in place, and churches continued to use familiar ceremonies and vestments that reflected the past. By blending reform with continuity, Elizabeth created a settlement that was neither fully Protestant nor traditionally Catholic. To further preserve unity, she intentionally kept some doctrinal statements vague, ensuring that only the most extreme Catholics or Protestants would find them unacceptable. In this way, Elizabeth crafted a religious compromise designed not to satisfy everyone completely, but to hold the nation together. Under Elizabeth, the Church of England developed into a unique hybrid that was neither fully Catholic nor fully Protestant, but distinctly Anglican. By carefully blending elements of both traditions, Elizabeth created a religious settlement that could accommodate a broad range of beliefs within her kingdom. This compromise, known as the Elizabethan settlement, provided the stability that England had lacked for decades. It not only eased religious tensions during her own reign, but also established a lasting framework for English religious life. In doing so, Elizabeth helped shape a national church that would endure for centuries and continue to influence the identity of England to this day.